PPS and parks and miscellaneous. If you want to go through them, there's really nothing to go through.
Miscellaneous.
Like those little bitty small things.
Oh.
You know, we can. That'll be it.
Okay, I think it's time to go ahead and call the meeting order. Prior to calling the meeting order, we'll go ahead and stand for the Pledge of Allegiance, followed by, led by Emily.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay. Okay, first order of business is roll call, please.
Fitzwater. Graham.
Present.
Hensley.
Present.
Hussey.
Here.
Kimna.
Here.
Mahalovich.
Here.
Prather.
Here.
Schreiber.
Present.
Ward. Here. Wiseman.
Present.
Okay. The order of business today is to finish up the budget presentations by Planning and Protective Services. Good. Parks, ready? Good. And any other miscellaneous funds. And it's up to the pleasure of the committee whether or not we want to continue on with parking lots and those kind of things, but otherwise that's what's on the agenda tonight. Any comments needed? Let's go ahead and start with Mr. Sanders. And you had sent us an email. Will you go over that as well?
I will refer to it, yes.
Okay,
yes,
very good.
I was trying to save a long, lengthy PowerPoint. If you notice, that email was dozens of pages long with just photographs and surveys, so yes.
Okay. Go ahead and proceed.
I believe y'all are familiar with my department. We basically have 4 divisions, and I will try to go through the individual budget items that are numbered up there with page numbers on each slide when appropriate. I think I have the PDF page number if you need it. With that, I will start. I have 8 more slides. Except my clicker's not working, Grant. First of all, we are planning protective services. Overall, our budget's about $2.2 million. We have about 23 or 24 staff members. Most of our expenses are personnel expenses, 87%. And there's 2 contracts that I will talk about later, the yard compost contract and the cemetery maintenance contract that is part of that 87% you see up there. Most of our 7% exercise budget cuts, and I will go into detail with these later, were basically from certain programs. All of the non-grant funded divisions, we did make cuts to material supplies, advertising, some of the smaller office supply type budget items, and then most of that were in those other large items there. Administration, administration basically is myself and 1 other staff member. Excuse me, 2. I can't count tonight. 93% of our budget is personnel services. We were able to reduce about $1,400 out of miscellaneous supplies and things like that, as noted in the budget. We do have 1 pink sheet item. Our printer, our color printer, scanner, fax machine is about 10 years old. It is using a more costly supplies, and it requires more service. There is another a machine downstairs that does the same function, but we share that with Public Works. So if this one goes down and the other one goes down, we may have a hard time. The cost is estimated about $8,000, and a quarter of that could be paid through the MPO. It's an eligible expense, and they do use it about a quarter of the time. Planning and zoning. Planning and zoning staffs the Board of Adjustment and the Planning and Zoning Commission. The Planning and Zoning has a little bit more, 2.7 employees. Most of the budget, again, of the $225,000 is personnel expenses. There's also we pay dues to the Mid-Missouri Regional Planning Commission. That uses probably about another 5 or 6% of the budget up. Therefore, we weren't able to reduce much out of that budget other than $860. Again, sort of miscellaneous items here and there, no major items. And we have no pink sheets there either.
Did you care to comment on any of the
Achievements and things?
performance objectives?
Most of our performance measures, except for one in environmental health, pretty much stayed the same. If you would like, I could address any particular one.
It looks like some progress is made on a few of those, so I didn't know if you had to comment on that.
Overall, we're staying steady or trending up, but there is one that I really want to make note of under the environmental health
Okay,
department.
when we get there. Okay.
Yeah. Yes, sir.
Any questions? Go ahead and proceed.
Okay, thank you. I'll find my notes too, so I don't get through here in 5 minutes or less. The planning and zoning folks, I mentioned they staff 2 boards. They perform several code amendments. They do long-range planning right now. We are appreciative of the council's action a couple years ago. We got a new staff member, and she's been supporting the development of the comprehensive plan, and also 2 of the South Side implementation projects, some of the major rezonings that we did earlier this year. She also has been important in supporting the historic preservation program, just due to the amount of workload and some of the changes in staff. We had a staff member leave, and she's been helping us with some of the planning activities in that division also. Some of the other achievements, or I guess they were things that cropped up, that was the small cell tower, the 5G cell towers. We've worked with Ryan on getting that through planning and zoning too, and then medical marijuana. So quite often, this group has to deal with sort of things that crop up out of nowhere. Obviously, plan reviews and talking to developers and things like that. There's no real way to gauge how much activity we're going to have in that area there. There were no pink sheets on this item either. If there's any questions, I'd be glad to answer them.
Doesn't look like there are any. Is Village of Mikey still, McKee, is it still around?
It has been, the state legislature actually changed the law to permit them to be annexed into Holt Summit.
Yeah.
And they are now part of Holt Summit. Speaking of Campo and the MPO,
Yeah, that's what I'm referring to.
the MPO is sort of a multi-jurisdictional government, not really, but it's administered by the city. But the board members are made up of Cole County, Callaway County representatives, and members from the city council, staff from different agencies and different communities. The membership and the geographic boundary includes St. Martin's, Taos, Wardsville, part of southern Cole County, up in Holt Summit, and what used to be Lake Mikey, and of course South Callaway County. The MPO is 100% federally funded. It is also highly personnel staffed, uses most of the budget. The city portion is about $27,000. Cole County chips in 5% of the match. So the part of the expenses that the city incurs is a match for the federal funds. The MPO performs the long-range transportation planning for the area, and also helps Jeff Tran with some of their transit planning activities. The recent study that was done that triggered off some of their changes was something the MPO did.
Yes, sir.
On the MPO, there's a line item for maintenance agreements, and current budget request is for 2070, or the mayor approved budget is 2075 in that line. Actuals for 16, 17, and 18 were between 525 and 686. Is there a new deal that we're locked into for something?
I don't recall, there was something with the maintenance, Margie. Do you recall if that was the scenario planning software moved from one category or to another? Or was that a finance calculation?
It is a finance calculation, but I'll have to look to see what got added there. I think wasn't there some new software for this area?
Yes, ma'am. It was I think it's InDesign, some graphic art software.
That's it.
To help support the long-range transportation plan that we just finished up as one of our
That's
major
the
activities.
increase.
So we think that's going to take us up to needing all 2,075 in that?
I think it's an ongoing license, if I'm not
Okay, so
mistaken.
it's, and then, even though you said this was all federally funded, but the dollars in here are city dollars, right? Or are we divvying up how to spend federal dollars?
This is the total expenditures, and then we have a revenue line for the 80% that the feds, it's reimbursement based, so you have to spend it
Okay.
first and then get reimbursed. And so there's a line in the revenues for the federal piece and the Cole County piece.
And we bill that every quarter.
Great, thank you very much.
One thing that we're planning on doing next year, it's using a lot of the data that we use for our long-range transportation plan and travel demand model, is we're going to do a thoroughfare plan for the whole area, which includes Jeff City, obviously, and that's going to be a component of our comprehensive plan. So quite often what the MPO does, the member jurisdictions leverage quite a bit. Thank you, Grant. The next item, redevelopment and grants, that is also referred to as neighborhood services sometimes. They administer a city program, the Neighborhood Reinvestment Act, which includes down payment assistance, commercial facade program, the rental facade program, and whatnot. We also manage the solid waste contract with Republic and deal with relations with that, Ripple Glass, and also the Household Hazardous Waste Program. That's something else we administer. The Historic Preservation Commission, so far this year, we've been getting 2 grant-based projects off the ground and wrapping up this month. The Historic Preservation Plan and the Circle Drive architectural study. And then we also, I believe at the last council meeting, we have a new grant for doing some structural analysis for the downtown area. So we administer that and administer those grants and those projects too. The budget is 51% personnel. The reason for that is those programs I mentioned, the commercial facade, the down payment assistance, and the rental facade. Those are areas where we actually took some major budget cuts. We did find $2,600 in material supplies and whatever that we felt we could cut. The residential down payment program, we felt that was one of our more valuable programs and did not want to cut that much at all. That is where we help homeowners with down payment assistance in basically the Old Town area. So helping convert vacant and rental properties to home ownership helps us overall in terms of reducing property maintenance issues, and also helps out in several different areas like that. The commercial facade program, we reduced that from $30,000 to $20,000. And the rental facade program, we went ahead and just sort of knocked that off altogether. Sometimes with that program, we don't always have participants, and we would roll that extra money into the commercial facade program. These programs, by code, are dependent upon available funding. So I'd like to make note of that. But that is all city funding on that. We did, due to the increases of activities on the historic preservation plan side of things, and the demolitions are taking a lot of effort. We often will get an application for demolition. It may not be thoroughly completed, so we have to do some work, some research. When was it built? What's the historic aspect of it before it's brought to the Historic Preservation Commission for consideration of what they want to do with that. Another pink sheet we had in there, ironically, was an increase for our residential down payment assistance program, because we really like that program a lot. So we ended up cutting something we asked for on a pink sheet. So hindsight's wonderful. Yes, sir. No. Yes, the other side of that is the Community Development Block Program. Grant, could you go to the next one, please? Yes, this is HUD funded. This is 100% federal. It's an entitlement. We get it more or less automatically as long as we kind of keep our nose clean and do what we need to do. The number up there in the budget is $218,000, but they basically tell us our yearly allocation. Like for 2019, we were just notified a couple months ago. That's why we're updating our consolidated plan. We have a public hearing, I think, soon on our annual action plan. But we will do a budget adjustment for about $300,000 total when appropriate, probably after we get the budget approved. And I think traditionally we do that at the beginning of the next fiscal year. Those are some of the programs up there. A lot of them help low to moderate income families. And basically the 3 census tracts in the core of the town are where eligible projects are. We've done some sidewalk projects under public improvement. We provide emergency assistance. We help with homelessness projects and programs, and some rehab for code deficiencies or energy efficiency programs. And we can pay for salaries out of that, and in the budget we have about $61,000 of personnel cost in there.
Questions? Yeah, Council Lady Ward.
Circling back to the previous slide, the rental facade program, didn't that begin like 2 years ago? That was, we always had the commercial one, but the rental one is one of our newest programs, I believe.
Let's see, I have some numbers here.
16, is that what it was? Okay.
I have, you're correct. Well, my
We
information
added
goes back to
something to it.
2016, and basically we've helped out over the past 4 or 5 years about 11 properties.
See, that was my next question. How many since its inception
Yeah,
have we helped?
yeah. I think the most recent one was the one across from the prison down on East Capitol Avenue.
Yes, which got a golden hammer last
Yes,
weekend.
yes.
Which is, I see that particular program is really helping our old neighborhoods, which really need extra assistance. In particular, our rental properties, our rental stock,
Mhm.
the condition of them. So I would really like to see either it split or the 20 grand moved to that program versus commercial.
Yeah,
Just
staff
mine.
certainly would not object to any sort of massaging that dollar amount or increase it as you wish.
Thank you.
Thanks. Any other questions?
I'm sorry.
You're still on this.
Yeah,
Okay, go ahead.
I'd still be on for my other budget items. Yes, sir.
But on this 174, page 174,
I was on the next one, actually, the Community Development Block Grant one.
yeah, which is 184.
184, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, I'd like to go back to 174 before you're done. but
Oh,
go
I'm
ahead.
sorry.
Well, the performance objectives there, performance, to me, it's, were you going to mention the compost site? It seemed like you said you was going to mention
Under
that.
environmental health.
Oh, that's under
That is
environmental.
actually.
Okay, because you
yeah.
have number of compost site participants under this performance.
Originally, in the transition a few years ago, the cemetery and the compost was supposed to move over into neighborhood services,
Mhm.
but given the workload, we kept it in environmental health. So it is the compost and cemetery is still sort of managed, those contracts, and the board is managed under environmental health, but that performance measure is erroneously in the neighborhood services.
it.
So I apologize about that. I didn't even realize
Yeah, it's
that.
kind of, so would you rather talk about when we talk about the compost?
Yes.
Those 3 or 4, okay,
Yeah.
well, I'll hold that thought. Go ahead and proceed.
Okay, thank you. That was basically it on the Community Development Block Grant. The next one under property maintenance, neighborhood services is property maintenance. A large portion of our budget, again, is personnel services. In the 7% reduction exercise, Some of the things that we do is when we identify nuisances is we will notify the property owner, and if they do not correct the nuisance over a period of time, we will actually abate the nuisance. We only abate the nuisance about 2% of the time. In my email to the council, I noted our performance over the last several years. In 2016, we had just approximately 1,100 nuisance violations. In 2017, we upped that to about 3,200. Last year, we had about 4,100 that we wrote up. And so far this year, I believe we're actually on today around 4,100, and we anticipate being able to notice up about 5,500 to possibly 6,000. That's due to several factors. One is the software that you all approved a couple years ago. We got that up and running. That helps us out quite a bit. Another is the actually things that you did in terms of some of the code changes that helped us out. Knowing where the landlords are helps us identify and contact them. Some of the dangerous building activities that are currently under consideration with the council that will be addressed, I believe, on Monday. We changed the nuisance ordinance regarding weeds, the definition of weeds. Believe it or not, that's helped us out. And the habitual offender section of the code in Chapter 18, where we included abatements as some of the items that would ultimately trigger more severe, I shouldn't say severe, but a higher penalty once those do get to court, when there are three certain types of infractions, of which having a property abated for a nuisance is one of. So we think those have made people more aware that they do need to maintain their property, and that's also provided us to actually be out on the street more, the software to identify these. So
similar to my last question, the software you just mentioned, is that the maintenance agreement line item that's in here?
I believe that's probably the bulk of it. It should be around
It's right around 13.
$13,000, I think, is
Okay.
just for that software.
So that's all
alone.
definitely accounted for in a contractual amount that we're required to pay? Okay, thank you.
So the abatement, it was hard for us to do, but we actually cut that down from $15,000 to $10,000. In our pink sheet, the annual actual expenses or abatement costs that we incur is averaging about $37,000 a year. If you notice, we have a pink sheet there that if you, our original budget number of 15 and 22,725 would have been that magic average number that we're actually spend each year. What we do is we rob from our demolition budget each year to do the abatements. Obviously, accumulation of trash, weeds, and things like that are more noticeable, and we can address more of them with that money than a demolition of a house. In doing that for the past several years, we have, I think, in our pink sheet, 7 or 8 properties, and our queue goes back about 3 years. 2016 was the latest, not latest, but the longest time ago that we had a dangerous building. Let me back up. 2016 is the furthest back building that we have on our list to demolish. Quite often, we have to choose based on how much money we have. We have one that we think will cost about $60,000 to demolish. That was a hoarder's house. It's down on High Street, so $110,000 was requested in the pink sheet to bring up that to $150,000 altogether, which we thought might put a very large dent, if not address most of those that we have actually incurred, had a hearing on declaring the building dangerous. So it's hard to also cut our demolition money, but we figure we still have $20,000 in our budget to move over to abatement and have to seek out funding in the future for demolitions. These are not tornado-related demolitions. These are ones that are already in the queue.
So my question would be, would you anticipate the need going up as a result of the tornado?
Yes. I hate to throw around numbers because we're actually impressed with the citizens taking care of a lot of their buildings already. We've been tracking some of the data. I don't have it in front of me. Before I went on vacation, we were just sort of ballparking possibly 40 demolitions that the city might do. we're not sure how much those would cost. You know, if it's just a matter of scraping off some debris that's left on the property, that's different than having to take down a house that is real close to an adjoining house. So we really don't have a good estimate on the cost of what that would be. There's also the chance that we might be able to do several at once, which would give us the economy of scale on demolishing some of those. But we'd have to go through the process on those, and those would be eligible for federal reimbursement also.
So, in light of what you just said, you're proposing a budget that cuts demolition by 20 and then asks it back in the pink sheet.
We didn't know we were going to cut it from 40 to 20 when we did the pink sheets, but those would only going to address the ones that we have identified through the dangerous building hearing process. Those are not related to any of the tornado damaged properties.
Any questions? Okay, continue.
Also on our pink sheets, one thing that relates to our performance on our code enforcement activities, we were requesting changing a position to a property inspector supervisor. Right now, we have what we kind of define as a crew leader. All the property inspector twos could be crew leaders, the way the job description is written. Before the class and comp study, we did have this position. It was an 18. We believe what happened was between the class and comp study, that position got vacant, that person left, and after the study or somewhere into that transition, we hired someone in as a property inspector. So I'm not sure really where that position went, but it would be something that is beneficial to us in terms of offloading some of the managerial responsibility from Jamie in Neighborhood Services, who has her hands full with all the recycling and the historic preservation activities and things like that. And so that is one I'd like to make note of, in addition to an additional property inspector and more demolition funding and vehicles, which certainly we are able to use police cruisers that no longer are useful for the police department.
Any questions? I might say that the numbers you provided in your email are pretty informative, so I don't know that we need to look at the performance unless you have something to add there.
No, I would like to note that we do publish all those numbers. We have an annual report on our webpage, and when you get the city employee newsletter monthly, we do publish sort of a year-to-date, and we break that down by the type of nuisance abatements that we do notice up and whatnot like that. So it's very informative. There's a real detailed spreadsheet in there that you can look at. Just like to make note of that. Grant? Here we go to the compost.
Council Lady Ward.
Quick question. You said we have 4 demos that we're sitting on?
Actually, we have, I think,
I can
6.
think of 3.
I'm going to get to my pink sheet here.
One on Jackson, one on Washington.
High Street, St. Mary's, 1421 St. Mary's. I want to be sure I don't quote some of those that are going to be done through the...
That's okay. How
well,
many...
we do some in the Community Development Block Program, too, so...
So how many... How long is it before we demo these? Because the ones I'm thinking of, you know, we're going on several years here that they still are sitting there, and then we have the expense of that property and, you know, our staff having to mow and clear. And
exactly. The longer we
so-
sit on them and then the homeowner walks away, we do have to maintain that through abatement. So we're doing that up on Capitol Avenue quite a bit. We have to maintain them being secure, boarded up quite often.
Those aren't slated for demo yet. We do have several that are, and I was wondering why it's taking so long for them to come down.
Because we
if
keep transferring the
funded
money from the demolition fund to cover abatement cost. Which, by the way, the abatement cost, in the pink sheet, you'll notice that we put down the annual amount that we have in budget, the annual amount that we actually spend, and then also the annual amount that we recover. So far this year, we spent $25,000 on abatements, but we have recovered through previous abatements $53,000. So the abatement process doesn't really cost money because we recover a large portion of it in addition to the administration fee. So I would propose that the abatement fund, it's really sort of inefficient to reduce because we recover most of those funds.
Gotcha. Okay. Thanks.
You're welcome. Now on to the one with the compost in it. Environmental health, they do several things. They inspect daycares, they inspect restaurants. Several different divisions, including them, will be called out if there's a fire at a restaurant over the weekend for inspection so they can open back up. They inspect food trucks and events out where there may be vendors. They also inspect nursing homes and things like that too. But the majority of it is restaurant inspection. They also manage the contract for the compost. You see the personnel expenses are about half of the $490,000, but the compost contract is $194,000 a year. 2 years ago it was about $230,000, but we had a new contract start at the beginning of this fiscal year. We also have cemetery maintenance. That's under contract too, to mow and maintain and do some light maintenance in cemeteries. Not necessarily tree removal, which sometimes gets us, but we were able to identify about $1,000 in miscellaneous expenses that we could cut in this item. One thing that we are doing this year, there used to be a mosquito control program. We sort of reactivated that due to the flooding. So we have gone out and sprayed in flooded areas, some of the areas where mosquitoes may be prone. We also have been doing larvicide. We were able to pull out the previous equipment. Central Maintenance did a great job of refurbishing it, and we bought some chemicals, and so we're doing that on a temporary measure too.
Okay.
One thing I would like to note, specifically on the performance measure for this one, you will note that there's an uptick in the number of violations found in restaurants. Depends on how you look at it. That could be a good thing that we're finding those, or a bad thing that they're occurring. Our response is we're going to continue with educating the restaurateurs and their staff. There's online training that we promote. We spend time with them regarding proper setup and managing their facility. So depends on how you look at that.
Yeah, I was going to mention that, but having you mention that, I don't need to. There's several items on 174 that related to composting, but also with regard to waste conversion. That you've already covered that, right? That was under your
in terms of the diversion of the recycling materials.
Yes.
No, I'd have to look at that myself, actually.
Are we at risk of any of these? I mean, we know we have a contract with Republic, and there are several. It said that the statement of the presentation was recycling is broken, and I'm wondering if any actions that are needed and if they're reflected in this budget.
They're not reflected in this budget. I do not know if any actions other than empty, clean, dry. You know, clean recycling helps out Republic in terms of maintaining what little revenue they do get for the recycling. So having clean recycling is important. I do not believe we're at any risk of any tragic change in our recycling program. I believe just ancillary that the aluminum side of things, which is their moneymaker, and then probably the paper, because we process both of those in the United States as opposed to plastic that goes overseas. I do know in some areas there have been tragic cuts in the recycling programs. I heard of one the other day. I can't remember where, but they're losing 7,000 jobs, 700 jobs in a major metropolitan area due to their canceling their recycling program. I think that's out west somewhere in Southern California.
Any questions? Proceed.
Building Inspection Division. These are the folks that review components of various plans, including the building plans, for accuracy, correctness, and make sure they're stamped by an appropriate engineer or architect. They also go out in the field and do the inspections, so they're very important in new construction. One example would be what I discussed in my sort of my rough notes that I sent to y'all that I was going to do a presentation on. But on the mechanical side, there were several life safety things that were identified. One of them being with the tornado recovery, the covering up of gas exhaust vents by roofers, and so that the carbon monoxide would actually stay in the building, and several other instances of inappropriate installation of mechanical systems, HVAC systems, chillers, things like that. But what we also find all sorts of things that can be corrected out in the field by the construction crews doing the work. So the inspectors are a component of helping life safety issues and quality of life issues, as I'm sure no one would want their air vent here, their intake vent here, as in some of those pictures I showed you. So we catch all sorts of things like that. Most of our budget is in personnel. We have very few supplies and very few other expenses, but we were able to cut about $2,000. These folks have been doing a remarkable job as part of the tornado recovery. I think I mentioned before in a previous meeting their workload has tripled in terms of number of inspections due to tornado damage and building permits being issued. We have yet to have to call in. We do have a part-time building inspector waiting in the wings, so to speak, that we have yet to call in. And we are also talking to the City of Columbia about helping them offload some of our work in terms of plan review if we're needed to, if we need to do that. So these folks have been doing real well in terms of continuing to go above and beyond in terms of the inspections. And they've been catching a lot of folks without business licenses, without building permits, and making sure the work is done. So I'm very proud of these guys. I kind of mentioned the mechanical inspector. Ironically, our plan reviewer is a very well-versed and experienced mechanical inspector that we were able to steal from a city to the north of us a couple years ago. We utilize him for what mechanical inspections we do. You saw those pictures. He's the one that took those photos. But he is focusing on the plan review side of things along with Larry. So we do call him into duty when one of the other inspectors sees an issue or there's a large major installation of HVAC systems. Some of the other requests that we're asking for are dues and publications. We'd like to get some new versions of the building codes and start reviewing those for possible consideration of updating. Assistant building official and some other jobs there. One that would really help out is the customer services rep or intake clerk. We feel having another person up at the front counter there with Ellen would help in times where perhaps she's off for leave. I calculated that she could actually be off of work with leave and things like that a couple months, and even going to training and things like that. We do watch the front counter. Public Works helps us out, and other staff helps out. But quite often, some of our staff in the back have to come up and help with permit intake. It just help with customer service. So I'd like to mention that pink sheet also. And we also had a couple vehicles. Excuse me, no, not on this one. Another thing we'd like to explore down the road is software, similar to what we've done with the property inspection folks. We have needs analysis up there. One thing we want to do, though, is, and we did this with the property inspection folks, is review the processes that we have, and there is an activity regarding that, but we'd like to get through that before we move forward with considering any software or hardware, but we have it on the budget as a heads-up item.
Any questions on that? Okay.
And that's my final
gonna say,
item,
that's-
and I'd just like to thank the council for the support they've given us in helping move the gauge from being proactive the last few years into being, from being reactive to proactive, and the support we get from other departments too. We couldn't do it without them either.
Okay.
I'd be glad to answer any pink sheet questions or performance measure questions.
Okay. Any questions for Mr. Sanders? Okay, Councilman Schreiber.
What would be the responsibilities of assistant building official?
Those would be multifaceted. Right now, Mr. Burkhart not only manages the division, which has 6 people, including himself. But he also does plan reviews. We have a plan reviewer, but Mr. Burkhardt is an engineer and an architect. The plan reviewer has experience. He's multi-talented. I don't mean to demean any of my employees in that regard. They're all good. The assistant building official would help with some of the managerial issues, offload some of the plan review issues, let Larry kind of work on some of the proactive kind of things, the building codes, getting the processes more efficient and things like that. Also, it would allow some depth. The current building official is eligible for retirement, so that would allow us a person to kind of help transition in the event that he did decide to retire. Not that I want him to retire. Please don't retire, Larry. He's probably watching this now. But it would help give us depth and manage day-to-day operations.
Thank you.
Okay, I don't see any questions and any discussion. Thank you, Mr. Sanders. Looks like you're off the hook for a little while.
Thank you.
So I think next up Parks. So Mr. Spalding, take it away.
Well, thank you all. I'm a little worried here sitting in Marash's seat, so if you guys let me know if he throws something at me.
I'd be more worried about being behind you.
So the 2020 budget that you have before you is very little has changed compared to our 2019 budget. Total income and expenses of $8,721,377. The one big change, as you all have been with us, staff and commission along the way, is the $750,000 payment for bond repayment for the debt service on our bonds. So that's the one change, obviously, in our budget, and we couldn't be more excited to be moving that forward. The commission approved this budget back in June 11th. We, because of the bonds and what we were wanting to do, we worked pretty early on this one this year. We spent a good amount of time. We met with, our commission has a budget subcommittee. We met with them on 4 separate occasions because there was a lot of work to make sure this was going to work. Margie was a tremendous help for us along the way because this was such a new a concept for our department. There was a lot of work not only to be done on this 2020 budget, but also, looking at the 10-year projection budget that I think you all have seen, just kind of how that bond repayment's going to look like 10 years from now with what we think our projections will be. A few things that the small changes that happened in our budget from last year. We've incorporated some of our smaller reoccurring expenses into our operating budget. Those things it would include small tools and equipment, rental skates, concession equipment, ropes, course inspection, and computer replacements. A lot of times we as a department had put those as pink sheet items, and we felt like that was more of a recurring expense, so we put that in our operating. One other little thing, beginning in 2020, our synchronized skating is an in-house kind of program, and so those revenues and expenses will be run through our operating budget and instead of the parents' clubs. So those line items were increased. To touch on the performance measures, we keep particular track of those. They're mostly positive. I think we're staying the same moving forward in a lot of areas. The one area that I think that we've spent a lot of time addressing because it's going to be very key to our growth, but you see a pretty good increase in our web presence, our online, our social media presence. That's the first place that our constituents look when they want to see programs or park-related things. They're going there first. And if they're not getting there in a quick hurry, then we're losing them. So we've paid some real special attention there. Pink sheets, because of where we're at with the bonds in our master plan. Oh, sure.
Yeah, I have a question about one of the performance objectives, which I think is kind of interesting. Your percent of program and facility cost recovery on user fees. You hovered around 55% last year. Now you're up to 63% as of, so there's a more of an effort, it looks like, to collect user fees for cost recovery, which is, I'm sure pleases the commission.
It's been a focus of ours, for sure, and we really, I mean, that's going to be certainly the key moving forward. We need to be, I mean, realistically, we need to be around 70% is where a healthy department is, a healthy Parks and Rec department. So that's kind of our goal, and I think we're making strides to get there in some areas. So.
Did you say 70%?
That's kind of our goal, yeah, department-wide.
Okay.
Yeah. A few of the pink sheet items, like I said, we're not doing a lot because of our master plan implementation, so really not a lot of pink sheet things. The one area that we did want to put some money into this year was our outdoor rec area. That's a new area for us, and it's an area that has a tremendous potential for growth. Our outdoor ropes courses, the different programs that we have at Bender and some other parks, we wanted to put a little bit of money into that, so I believe around $16,000 or so we put into, and pink sheet items, into our outdoor recreation, as well as a little bit of funding in our link pink sheet items. We funded some futsal goals because we found we borrowed some goals last year to try a tournament here, which we've never had a tournament at the link. We borrowed those, and it was pretty successful, and we think we can have more. So we thought it'd be good to purchase those, as well as basketball goal adjustments for some of the younger age group tournaments there. And really, that's our budget in a nutshell. I didn't want to spend too much time, but like I said, not much changes except the bond. So I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Councilman Prather.
I had a question. I was looking at the sales tax increases from 2016 to 2018. It looks like about 1%. Then it took a dip in 2019, and then from 2019 and now went up about 8% on the sales tax. Is there? Could you or Margie explain the big increase?
Margie, you want to hit that?
What page you on, Councilman?
Yeah, it's 340.
Well, it should mirror the same percentage increases we experience in our general fund sales tax.
I think Margie, wasn't there one year that we had gauged the increase on the previous year's budget instead of the actual, and that's where we're catching up this year, I believe.
But you're talking actual to actual to actual, correct?
2019, well, actually, 2019 adopted is what I was looking at.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then mayor approved budget of 5.7 almost. So that's.
Yeah, so what Todd said is correct, that $5,250,000 was based on a percentage growth over a flat $5 million instead of looking at the actual over the last couple of years.
Okay, so we're pretty comfortable with that number then?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Good question. Any other questions? And I think you did say the commission had reviewed this and approved these budget line items.
They did. They worked very hard this year, especially. We spent a lot of time looking at numbers. Yes.
Okay.
You said you guys approved your budget, you said in June?
June 11th meeting,
June 11th.
The commission approved this budget, yes.
Okay. Any questions for Mr. Spalding? I guess we're good with that, and so we'll proceed on to miscellaneous budgets. Margie, can you help us out on those funds?
Yeah, I'm just going to touch on some of those small funds, not spend a lot of time on it. Under your tab 3 of your book are the sales tax funds. And so the only sales tax fund that we have in a proposed budget for is the sales tax G. It starts on page 332. The $5 million revenue projection is something that we have just split over the life of the sales tax, even though we know the sales tax has been coming in a little bit more than the $5 million. Starting on well, the bottom of that page, on page 332, are the projects that are proposed for the fiscal year 20 budget for the sales tab, based on the sales tax G, and it's a little bit less than the revenues because of some cash flow issues. We actually might cash flow some projects more in one year and less in others. So unless there are any specific questions about those projects, the department directors will probably have to give you more information on the specific projects, but you can see by line item those items that are budgeted out of sales tax G, those capital projects.
Public Works and Planning, I think, gave us a really good outline of some of those projects under their department, and it shows that at times the county doesn't have anything, any stake in it, but eventually it'll come around to where that agreement with the $5.5 million will eventually even out.
Correct.
Over the 5 years, 6 years. Six. Is there anything we need to look at in prior years that are subject to gleaning? Is there anything that is subject to gleaning in prior year sales tax?
We do have some open projects, but we updated that, I think, last year. There's not a lot. And we can certainly do another update on that.
Okay. You will not know whether there's any gleaning dollars until those projects are closed out. Is that
Correct.
what I gather?
Correct.
Okay. And then the one big amount that's moving forward, hopefully, and be used in future will be those monies that are identified in sales tax by name related to Adrian's Island, and that Greenway project will be moved over to that project when it's completed and used for maintenance, as I understand it, as the voters approve those in past years.
The maintenance for the bridge is in parks, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
So, okay. Any other miscellaneous?
Under tab 4, we've got our two self-funded, our self-funded health insurance and our self-funded workers' comp. The first one is the self-funded workers' comp on page 334. The mayor-approved budget is $400,000 for the insurance estimate for payments, and then transfer out of the surplus to equate to the almost $494,000 budgeted for fiscal year 20 for claims and other expenses of administering the workers' comp fund.
Councilman Prather.
Did we find out what our increase was going to be for the health insurance? What percentage increase it's going to cost for us this year? I know we budgeted 5. Did we give an actual number yet?
No, we budgeted 1.9% on the health insurance.
Only 1.9%. So have we gotten the actual figures yet to tell us how much it is actually going to go up, or it's going to cost us, I guess is what I'm trying to get at. What percentage increase that we're going to have to incur as a city?
Well, yes and no. I think Gail may have some specifics, so we're ready to talk a little bit about where we are on that, and that some of that relates to the self-funded health insurance that Margie was just talking about. So we can talk about that now. Sure. Yeah, sure.
Sure. So our health insurance, we're self-funded. So there's 2 fixed costs in the plan. The fixed costs are the administrative services agreement that we have with United Healthcare, and they are basically our third-party administrator. They handle all of the claims. So if an employee goes to the doctor, a claim is sent from the doctor's office through United Healthcare, who pays that out of our funds, our self-insurance funds. So the administrative services contract is actually, those costs are going to go down slightly, only to the tune of about $20,000 savings per year. However, then our other fixed cost is the reinsurance. So we are self-funded up to the first 100,000 for any one claim. So if an employee is, or a member is injured, the first 100,000 of that we would pay for. Anything over 100,000, the reinsurance would kick in and they would pay the remaining amount of that claim. Could go up to $1 million. They would pay that. So that is our most expensive part of that, and that is going to see about a 36% increase, and it's also going to go up from $100,000 base to $125,000 base. So that cost increase is going to be about $250,000 increase. So then the rest of the cost of health insurance then is just the claims. So this year, we have been hitting at about 70% of usage. So in other words, if our premiums take in, whatever our premiums take in, we've been paying out in claims an amount about 70% of that going out in claims. That actually is very, very good. But that is only on our standard claims. We do have some high claims that have hit the reinsurance. And if you include those, then it goes up to about 90%. Does that all make sense? Is that clear as mud?
Yes, clear as mud. As far as health insurance goes, the cost, I guess you could say, is probably driven by, the increase is probably driven by our experience.
It is. And kind of what we anticipate then. So we have, when we first went self-insured, our rates were established as a recommendation from United Healthcare that said, given this plan, this is what we would recommend your rates being. So we do that. Keep in mind then we put premiums in, and then we pay claims out of that and our fixed costs out of that. So that goes into any balance remaining, then goes into our self-insurance fund, right? Our self-insurance fund, our goal has been to get that to $1 million. Right now we're at about $800,000, which actually for a very immature plan, I mean, we've only been doing this, 3 years, is actually very, very good. We are certainly going, we took a hit this year on our reinsurance going up, and we're obviously going to take a big hit on our reinsurance going up again next year. So since we set those initial rates, though, our rates have been going up based on the amount that's budgeted. So, for example, I think last year we had a 4% increase in the budget, so the rates went up 4%. And that would be the city's cost and the employee's cost.
So given a bad year or some experience that negative, like you said, I mean, it could certainly have an impact on that self-insured part of that fund. Mm-hmm. And, we have to make some adjustments there and hopefully not have to come back to council and continue other adjustments there. But just, the experience piece of that. And like Gail said, we had a couple of good years and a couple of bad years, and that's kind of what that fund is for.
So there is a cost associated with it, and there is an increase. And usually employers have a decision to make as to whether they're going to absorb some of it themselves or pass it along to their employees. You said that in the past you've done like a 2% or something like that to the employees. That's built in?
Well, we do to the employees the same amount that the city assumes in the budget. So if this year there's 1.9% in the budget, so the city's portion would go up 1.9% and the employee's portion would go up 1.9%.
Right. But as far as the overall increase of 36%, we're going to absorb that in the balance that we have.
Yeah, but keep in mind the 36% is only the increase to the reinsurance.
Right.
Okay, that doesn't mean there's a 36% increase to the administrative services contract with United Healthcare or to the claims.
Right.
And of course the claims is totally what is unknown.
I'm just saying that there is a cost associated with it. It doesn't necessarily have to go to the employees, but I'm saying that there is a cost that we are incurring as a city. Okay. That's all right. Thank you.
If I can just add, we do have a resolution on the agenda for Monday night at the full council meeting to accept the renewal agreements from Sun Life Reinsurance for the reinsurance and with United Healthcare for the administrative services agreement.
And part of that really is just, the timing with their needs and our budgeting process. So this is really just an opportunity to say, yes, this is where we're headed for Sun Life in this particular example. So.
Right, and then we'll set the actual premiums once the budget's approved and we know what's in the budget for increases.
Any questions?
And so the self-insurance for the health insurance, if you look at page 337, you'll see that in 2016, there was $60,000 added to the fund. Then in 2017, 572, which is, the premiums, the revenues, less the claims. So this means that we had fewer claims than the premiums that were collected in those 3 years, seeing that actual. And the approved budget here doesn't reflect those, the insurance payments, the claims amount, because those are in each one of the department's budgets under group insurance, under personnel services. So that's where you're going to see the budgeted amount for health insurance.
And if I could, I just want to mention again what Margie just pointed out and Gail mentioned earlier, is that the self-insurance fund, the intent of that was to help stabilize some of the increases that you may see a big increase and a smaller increase, less of an increase. So the self-insurance fund, hopefully, the intent of which is to get that built up, but also to be able to take out some of those spikes or be able to minimize some of those spikes, which is what that, to me at least, points out that it's doing. Now, experience is a big part of that, what happens with actual cases, health cases.
Along with that, I'm sure that Wall Street's probably recommending, or the insurance company's recommending, a certain level we need to keep in that fund.
Yes, they do recommend the $1 million, which is kind of what has been our goal since we established the self-insurance.
And we've been trying to get...
Not immediately, but in the long run.
Right, to get there, yeah. You can never, well, I don't know, maybe some organizations can.
Yeah.
But most organizations can't immediately fund that kind
Right.
of balance.
Okay.
Good question.
Okay. Any further questions? Does that conclude the...
And then the last part of it is under tab 6. We've got a few funds we can go over pretty quickly. The Jeff City Veterans Plaza Fund, that's outside the police building, just has some interest for revenues, and then we've got some maintenance and repairs and bricks there for the expenditures of $2,000. The Police Training Fund, the $30,000 under expenditures is used for police training, to enhance the police training that's also in the police department budget. The lodging tax is where we have this fund is...
I have a question about the police training fund. It seems to me that there was a percent of something collected every year, and that we kind of wiped that out a few years back. Are we building that back up? And explain that mechanism, because I kind of forgot.
Yes, so that's a part of the court cost. I believe it was $3 per citation. The court forwards that a certain amount to the state, and the state returns $3 each to us, and that is slowly growing.
Are we building up a fund as a result of that, or do we spend it as soon as we get it, pretty much annually?
We build it up.
Okay.
That's our intent. As you said, a few years ago, we were required to kind of spend it down, but now I think we maybe receive $5,000 or $6,000 annually, close, something like that. So we're building it back up slowly.
Okay. Thanks for the history lesson. I forgot that. Okay. Proceed.
The next tab is the lodging tax. So it's estimated to pull in $1.2 million. The city retains an administrative fee. That's the $26,000 there, and then the $504 and the $672 are transferred to convention and visitors funds for that 3-cent and 4-cent tax.
Okay. By the way, their census have been really good last few months.
They have. The City Hall Trust Fund is next. No budgeted expenditures for that. The only income is some interest income allocation. The USS JC Submarine Trust Fund, nothing budgeted for that this year. It also only has income of the allocated interest. The Woodland Cemetery Fund, we've got, we did increase the cemetery maintenance to $7,700 for FY20, just based on the fact that we had some growth in the fund, and also some trees that probably need to be taken care of in the cemetery. And then the last fund is under tab 7, and it's the TIF fund. And this is just an estimate of the revenue and costs for administering our TIF projects in the city. That's it.
Any questions on any of those? Yes, Council Lady Weissman. Have you concluded?
Yes.
Okay, then go ahead with your question.
Ryan, would this be a good time to bring up the request by the city attorney? Or not city attorney, I'm sorry, prosecutor.
That's good, yeah, that's a good point.
Sure. So at Administration Committee yesterday, City Prosecutor Galen Carver made a request for a part-time prosecutor clerk. I think we were working on the final numbers of exactly what that would be, but the Administrative Committee referred that to the Budget Committee for its consideration of that request. The request came in from the City Prosecutor kind of after the pink sheet process, and so we're kind of catching up. So essentially what the prosecutor is looking for is a part-time prosecutor clerk to work about 2 days a week. We're pegging at an administrative tech position to work that job. What were we saying the rough ranges would be? Annual cost.
About $15,000.
About $15,000 to fund that. Essentially, there are administrative tasks related to the prosecutor work that largely were done by court staff previously, and with changes to state law regarding operation of municipal courts and changes to Supreme Court rules regarding operation of courts. New rules require that judicial staff, municipal court staff, be separated from the prosecutor work, and that there are certain types of work that is for the prosecutor and not for the court, and it's not appropriate for the municipal court clerks to be performing prosecutor clerk work. And so for a large part, we believe that a lot of that work is not getting done, and so we are facing, I think probably the best way to put it is that we're facing a situation where the prosecutor is not working as efficiently as possible. And so she has requested that she be provided a prosecutor clerk. We've brought up a few meetings ago that the prosecutor, which used to be under the municipal court budget, is now under mayor council budget, getting paid out of the same funds that the mayor council gets paid out of. That change also is due to changes in state law and Supreme Court operating rules. And so this is kind of a continuation of a theme that we have seen taking place over the last few years, where you are really separating the various functions, the police functions, the finance functions, the judicial administration functions, and the prosecutor function, and having as few places of overlap between the people that do those functions as possible. And so that is why it's because the prosecutor clerk would be working for the prosecutor. I think the likely spot for any type of prosecutor clerk expenditures would have to probably be some sort of non-departmental, either the mayor, council, or some other non-departmental budget. And so I don't think we have a clear answer on exactly how do we pay for that position. And so part of the reason, probably the main reason, that the administration committee forwarded to the budget committee for its consideration. So about $15,000 annually for a part-time prosecutor clerk.
Is this a pink sheet to be considered during this budget process?
Yes, I think that is the appropriate way to consider it.
So if it were forwarded to the Budget Committee, they don't meet till the 19th of September, I think.
No.
No, this.
This committee, the Budget
not
Committee,
the
not the
Finance
Finance, the Budget Committee.
Oh, okay. So thank you for that.
You're it.
clarification. You're it. Okay, it's here. Okay. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Okay.
And we'll get you some additional information with the exact.
Yeah, we just have to pencil in under the wide sheet, the landscape sheet, that position is being requested through the court.
Yeah, we may want to have Margie just update that, and I think, did we have the gloves or something else that was on there, so we could update that
Okay,
for you.
that would be great. Okay. Any other items to be brought forward to the Budget Committee? I don't see any. So I think what we're prepared to do is to have any Budget Committee discussion with regard to our presentations. I would think that we're probably maybe not ready to finalize the budget tonight, so we may have some requests from staff. And I do want to say, having gone through the budget each year, it seems to me it's more clear to me now after 8 of these than it was after the first year. But I so much appreciate the staff's work and the description, the overview, the purpose statements, the goals, the performance objectives. If it helps you as a management tool, it certainly helps me to describe a little bit, to understand a little bit more what goes on. I also like the significant changes in initiatives. That was very helpful in terms of summarizing. So the good work you've done isn't going unnoticed, and I certainly appreciate it. It makes our jobs a lot easier. Are there any other just general comments? Okay.
Not from us that I know about.
Okay. So the desire right now is to have any kind of discussion, and we can actually start on the parking lot tonight. Maybe not interactively, but we could have that or discussion, or we could move to adjourn. It's a pleasure of the Budget Committee.
Boy, that didn't take long.
I would say, just as a comment from this chair, and not to use it as a bully pulpit, but this is not a very to me, the budget in my own mind isn't very forward-thinking in terms of future years down the road. And I just don't, I see 9 police cars needed or 13 this year, 9 this year. And if we don't approve those, then we're going to get double the number of requests for cruisers next year, and that's just one department. So at the very end of last year's budget, we did kind of nod our head that we thought we needed a sinking fund. And that sinking fund is not growing, and there's still a need there. So I know we're going to be covered up with some tornado costs that may eat into our fund balance, and then that triggers you by our policy to have a plan to reestablish a 17% fund balance. So that's not reflected in the budget. If we are to expect FEMA to pay for all of it, or how we're going to get it back to 17%, it's just there's a lot of uncertainty in next year, and you presented us with a budget, I think, that works, and I'm confident that it will work and it will balance, but I'm not sure where it gets us in year 2 and 3. But that's also something else for another council to deal with, and I don't know if you had any comments on that, but I do have concerns about its forward thinking of this budget.
I would just add that Margie did provide an out year look for 4 or 5 years, and then there are more years of that. So and that certainly has different assumptions based on it, and we're putting together what we think the current costs are tornado flood related, and trying to take a little look at what may anticipate some of those additional costs. I think that we'll be able to cover a lot of those costs with the existing budget, understanding that something else may not, that was planned, it wouldn't get done. But that still remains to be seen.
Clarify that comment, because what I'm seeing out of Public Works and what I'm seeing out of, well, I really don't have a good handle myself on the overall
And we're putting
cost.
together some.
So if you say, I just added it up the other day, and I know it's well over $250,000 in
Yep.
just one area, and that's not counting some signs replacement and some other things, and maybe some other things, and that's only one department. So how is it that you feel will cover that?
Yeah, I'm not saying we'll cover everything with existing. There certainly depends on, I think, a lot about how much council wants to do and that we have to do. Demolitions are a good example. If there are a lot of demolitions that we need to get done, some of that gets, there's some things that could be delayed. But yeah, there's certainly an impact on fund balance. There can be, depending on how many kinds of things we get covered and things that may not get done. Some of the hours are already covered. Regular hours, the 8 hours as we might want to call it, and then overtime hours. Well, instead of spending that overtime on something else, we spent them on tornado and flooding related kinds of things. So I'm not saying that there's not going to be any impact on fund balance. I just I can't estimate what that would be right now. And then FEMA contributions remain, reimbursements remain to be seen, and then there is a time lag for those.
Okay. I think I used this microphone enough. Yes,
Well,
Councilman
I guess I would just counter that a little bit. I appreciate staff's budget. I would argue that the staff have been forward thinking. It's just the revenues are not there to match the needs they have. They haven't hidden the fact that they have a variety of needs, capital needs, vehicles, staffing, those sorts of things. It's just that revenues are not there. I appreciate the fact that the police chief is not hiding the fact he has 13 vehicles that are at this mile level, and that Mr. Sanders hasn't hidden the fact that he could use multiple staff to achieve success in his department. To me, that is forward thinking. The challenge we face, and I discussed this with the mayor today, was our revenues collectively do not provide us with the resources that we may need to match the expectations of our community at times. And so the bigger conversation to have isn't necessarily about where do we shave a little bit of money here or there to fund a certain item. It's a larger conversation about prioritization and what can we do to generate more revenue to provide what our citizens expect in terms of paved roads, sidewalks, abatements, demolition, a quick response for a building permit, adequate, police vehicles that aren't approaching 150 to 200,000 miles, sufficient fire equipment to meet the demands of the department. I don't have a good answer. I think you all have done a great job providing perspective on what needs to happen on the operations of the city. You don't control revenue. None of us in this room directly can force people to purchase more things. I don't have a clear answer to that question, but it strikes me as that is the central budget issue that's going to have to be addressed in this community to figure out where it goes in the next 10 to 20 years, is how do we have revenue to match what the expectations of this community are.
I couldn't agree more.
I'd like to add to that. And revenues, that's fine, everything, and we hope that we can get them. But at the same time, we need to be prepared to look at the expense side of things too, and decide what we can afford to do, what we can't afford to do. So it's got to be done at the same time.
No, I think you've covered everything very well.
I have to say this before we adjourn. I agree with Councilman Hussey. And I thank staff for bringing the things that they need to this body. That's what this is for. But some of the things I do have some concerns with, and that's like a one-time purchase item. For example, I have a real serious concern about the radio tower. That could have been a one-time fund request for something to serve as for the safety not of just the citizens but our police officers. That is very, very disturbing to me, to where that we get to the budget process to ask for a $15,000 radio tower that's certainly has the capabilities of saving someone's life, whether it be a police officer's life or whether it be a citizen's life. And that's just very disturbing to me. So I just want to encourage the department heads to, if there's something that's out there that we really need, and you can't wait to this budget process, bring it before the committee so that we can have that conversation. For example, and I'm using this as an example, I would not wait until if we had 3 snowplow trucks and 2 of the engines went out all of a sudden in October. I don't think we wait to the next cycle period to ask for an additional truck. And we know that the winter is coming. Hope we wouldn't do that. So I just want to say that for those items like that, those one-time items, please bring it before the committee because, like I said, this radio tower, I'm very concerned with. Thank you.
Okay. All those in favor say aye. Opposed? We stand adjourned.